Hello everyone, welcome to Word on the Street. I'm Shelly, your host, and I'm with a guest today.
Hi, I'm Mariah Aragon. I'm Vice President of NAC, the Native American Coalition for Change, and I'm from Montana. I am half Native and half Mexican. I'm two tribes. I grew up on the Crow Reservation, and I'm a sophomore at Santa Clara right now.
Thank you for introducing yourself. So I guess we're going to just kind of dive right into what we're going to be talking about on this podcast is kind of the Native experience, at least your specific experience. I don't really want to tokenize it in any regard. I think, of course, there's different experiences for each Native individual, and depending on like what tribe you're from and what representation you have. But yeah, I just want to really hear about your experience coming to campus and kind of the culture shocks of, you know, being primary in like a Native community and then coming to, you know, Santa Clara University and being in California, I guess.
Yeah, so I am on the cross country and track team. So when I first came to Santa Clara, it was on a recruiting visit. And I feel like the biggest thing I noticed when I first came was the diversity. I saw many people from different tribes, different ethnic backgrounds. It was a big shock for me because back home where I'm from, the majority is Native Americans or white people. So it was very fascinating for me, and I just saw it as a place that I wanted to be a part of because I felt more, I guess, welcome in a sense because there wasn't just two groups of people.
So like having two primary dominant groups, it kind of gets like them versus us kind of mentality, but when you're in such a kind of melting pot of our country, it's like it's like everybody's so different that there isn't really that mentality kind of developing. But I don't know if you can speak from that.
Yeah, I felt like my parents and I were both like, wait, like people aren't just staring at us, and like the people that are checking us out aren't like thinking that we're stealing or like different things like that. It felt like there wasn't as much judgment as there is back home, which I didn't realize how much there was back home until I came to Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm. When you came to Santa Clara, was it easy to kind of find community, and not just like Native community, but community in general with people? And kind of what was your experience, you know, coming into the school and finding friends and being around so many different people?
Yeah, I personally get along well with many people, so I feel like I made a lot of friends. And a lot of people, like most of my friends never met a Native American. So there was a lot of like assumptions about Native Americans, or just like not, like people just weren't familiar or never heard of a person. They would just like say, oh yeah, we read about that in our American history class or like things like that. And it's like, yeah, I am Native. My parents are Native. Like we are still present today in society. But I feel like I was able to make friends from, like, most of my friends are from different ethnic backgrounds. Like, I don't think any of my friends are really, like, white, which is, like, what I grew up with back home. And so I feel like I made a lot of friends with, like, people from different, like, cultures. And as for, like, the Native community, I felt like it took me a really long time to find people. And I also realized, like, how small the Native community is. I think I've found right now, like, our president of NAC is Native. She's also half Mexican as well. So I felt like it felt nice to find someone, but it took a long time of looking and like trying to find other students.
Do you feel like you're represented on the campus? Like, do you feel like when you came to campus that there was an underlying recognition of Indigenous people?
No, I felt like I didn't really see much or know much about the Native tribes or that were living before Santa Clara was built on the land. And like through Isabella, the president, I found out more about it. But I also felt like the fact that it was so hard to find the Native American club was like concerning, like especially if this campus was built on like Native American land, and there's supposed to be a recognition of that. We have a land acknowledgement. Like, it shouldn't have been that difficult for me to find the NAC club, whereas like you can find these other clubs pretty easy. And I just felt like it was frustrating to like not find as much like representation or really see anything about like acknowledgement towards our Native community and things like that. I feel like there's not really many posters, but there's like the school puts effort into having posters and like things about events and stuff like that, yet there's no posters really about like Native involvement, Native community recognition, anything like that, which is something I noticed, especially like at my school. We always have something that's Native events related and like stuff like that. So
that makes sense. I guess like in perspective wise, like, you know, growing up in Washington, there's a lot of federally recognized tribes in Washington, and the Native American community was present, but it wasn't like so like talked about. And I feel like when I went on campus, like I felt like, wow, this is like so much conversation is going on. Like if you found it, like if, you know, I go to the OML and I go into this, like there is some work that's being around it, but it's like a specific group, and it's not the whole campus. Like there isn't like this whole amount of acknowledgement, and that's really interesting to hear your perspective, because like I was like, oh well, I feel like there's more, but I feel like especially if you grew up in a very Native dominated space, like you're like, this is like nothing, like what's going on, like where's representation going through campus.
Yeah, because I didn't even, if it wasn't for your help, I wouldn't have found NAC. And I feel like what you were saying is you have to go out of your way to find, and like with all good things you want to go out of your way, but it's also like if the school can have so much representation for all these business events, all these like on campus events, like why don't we have as much representation for like the people you stole the land from and you have this facility on?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of tensions are on that too, and I feel like we still need to strive more for our Santa Clara community, students, staff, into what ways that we can kind of make a movement toward having more representation continuously, just because like that's like the big part of the minority group that is probably like, if we're on this land and we're into this institution, we do have kind of a responsibility, in my opinion, to figure out how we are incorporating spaces for Native spaces. But that kind of leads me into something I kind of want to discuss, like coming onto campus. What were some previous like misconceptions? Do people have like assumed things about Native American people? Did you ever feel like you had a lot of misunderstanding as being Native American, and how like these misconceptions and stereotypes, like what was your response to them? And if you want to like, if anybody was going to ask you like, what are some things that are like some big misconceptions that people, most like the dominant area believes, like what would you want them to know? What were some things? I know this is a loaded question, but whatever you want to like provide answers for.
Yeah, I feel like I met a Native student who was like originally the president of NAC last year when I was a freshman, and I remember talking to her and she told me that her ancestors were Native, and for me I was a little confused because I was like, your ancestors? Like, my mom's Native, I'm Native. Like, it just made it sound like something that was very like in the past, historical. And I felt like when other people I talked to, a lot of them were like thinking about, oh, what did I learn in my history class? Like, and it's like, we are people today, like there's many people that live today that are Native. Like, our populations are like significantly smaller, but like we still live with like what's happened to our ancestors. And yeah,
I think I've kind of also fallen victim to the idea too, as like having representation for Native American people through just like historical history and remarks and practices. And I feel like when we think about it, we think of it as a time in past, because that's all people are consumed with like acknowledgement of Indigenous people and media representation and kind of like Native authors, Native like, you know, like artists is not as a big, I guess not as a big in the conversation of big circulating media. So honestly, people just kind of already assume the only thing that they really heard about is like, oh, they're history books about Columbus and all of these things. And yeah, I could see that, but representation has been limited in media. And I kind of want to hear your thoughts on media representation, especially through films and TV shows, music. Like, what kind of representation of Native or in general Indigenous people have you kind of seen? Do you feel like you're being represented well in media?
Yeah, for movies, I feel like we're beginning to be a little more recognized. There was some famous movies like Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't remember the lady who played, last name Gladstone, but she actually did an amazing job in that film. And I felt like a lot of my people back home in the Native community really appreciated her role. I felt like that she played it well. I feel like there was a lot of actors who play as Native Americans, and a lot of them are more like light-skinned natives, which I feel like isn't really accurate. I feel like a lot of natives are darker, but it seems like in films there's always a lighter cast of a native, and I feel like it's not the best to depict Native American communities, because I feel like when people see a lighter skinned native, everyone just kind of assumes, oh, that's what all of them look like, and it's kind of like not really a win battle, I feel like. And like there's a famous Native actor who's actually not Native. She's Chinese and like half Chinese, half white, but she plays a lot of like more of the popular movies as a Native American, which is like annoying, because there's so many Native actors who are trying to land roles that actually play their own like culture, their own identity. And I feel like a lot of the media just does not represent our community. And I feel like if you were to look back at movies years ago, most of the natives represented were like very stereotypical costumes, and like were depicted as like foreign and couldn't speak the language, had their own language. And I feel like it viewed Native Americans a lot like how society continues to view them. I feel like they depicted them not as humans but more as like animals, which is like in most movies when you see Native Americans, you see it from the white person's view. You don't see it from the Native American view and how we are people and we have our community. And you see why like Native Americans say we're in a war, like why that was beneficial for their people, or they were only protecting their people, yet it was an inconvenience to the white settlers. And I feel like we're never represented our side or ever really shown our own point of view. We're just a side character to or an inconvenience to the main actors of the movie.
I feel like that feeds into historical implications and the systematic oppression institutions that have created and been formulated in a colonizer or white colonial sense that continue not only today their impact of oppressing Native Indigenous erasure. That is, I feel like right now that's why even shows in media that how continued stereotyping, continued the erasure of how much colonial ideas, that type of stuff has completely marked and changed the way that we view Native Americans to this day. And I kind of want to shift a little bit in regards to education. I want to hear your experience of coming to campus, and did you have any struggles, and just like with the educational realm, and even like learning history and how things are viewed through different lenses of academics.
Yeah, back home in high school, I had a 4.0 GPA. Like middle school, I also had a 4.0 GPA, and I feel like I was very on top of things. I was on class all the time, like got all my assignments done, never had homework, and it was just very easy. But I feel like in high school, teachers were just trying to get students to come to class. Like if you came and you showed up, like you would pass the class. And when I came to college, it was just like you could give 100% and still fail. And I feel like I struggled a lot, and I didn't know how to ask for help in high school, it just was never something that I had to do. And when I came to college, I was struggling and I was afraid to ask for help. And I feel like where I come from, a lot of people don't want to ask for help and don't want to be in an uncomfortable position or be vulnerable to admit that, hey, I don't understand this and I need help. And I feel like in college, it took me a really long time to ask for help. I pushed it off so much to the point where like I was gonna fail the class. And I finally asked the professor, and the professor was like more than willing to help me. I feel like every professor I asked for help like gave me so much support and like helped me a lot. And I felt like that was just like from coming from my back home was just something I really struggled with. And I feel like it wasn't even me. I feel like there's many other students that would struggle with the same thing. And I feel like the professors genuinely care and like showed me that I would be supported. And yeah, I feel like that was a big thing that I struggled with. And I also, I don't know.
Pause.
Yeah, sorry. I struggled with a little bit of imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't belong here. I felt like it was a big deal back home in my community for me to leave, especially to come to a school in California. A lot of students first of all, don't really go to college after high school. A lot of students are just trying to graduate high school. And I feel like it was a big deal for me to first of all go to college, but to also go to a college out of state. And I felt a little bit of pressure to succeed, but also like I had no example. I had no one to follow or no one to like see that, oh, they did it, I can do it too. I felt like it was, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can make my family proud, make my community proud, and show them that it's done, because it's hard. And I'm struggling so much. And like maybe this is why people stay back home. Maybe this is why people just get a job after high school. And like I really, really struggled to come to the fact that like I deserve to be here. And like I worked hard to be here. It's just going to take more effort from me, and I'm going to have to put in more work than everyone else because of the resources I wasn't given in high school.
I feel like there's a lot of layers of what I'm hearing, right? Please like correct me if I think, but it kind of sounds like both the academic institution of which you got school had a different kind of perspective of motive and goal. It's like get through school, like just finish as much as you can. Like we'll if you put in the work, we're gonna make you get that A, but like maybe it isn't going in the direction of like the academic rigor that might set you up successfully later through your college career. And the cultural element of having this do it yourself, figure it out yourself, this is, nobody's going to help you, you're the only person that needs to help yourself. And that mentality fed into your academic journey into college, which actually created a lot of barriers for you to even be open to getting help. And like looking at our Santa Clara community, I feel like I could speak to most of the professors and know that their motive is, if you ask for that help, they will give it to you as much as they can, and they will get you through the class as much as they can. Because at the end of the day, like their motive too is for you to be successful and graduate and finish that class with the best grade you possibly can. So I could see both of those parallels really intertwining and causing a lot of constriction for you to move forward and ask for the help that's needed. But then also for the fact of not having any representation and for your community in Santa Clara sometimes, like, or also just coming from a place that a lot of people don't go to college or struggle to make it out of high school. Like maybe their first thoughts are just like, get me through high school. I don't even want to think about of college. And there's a lot of barriers for that, financially and your family, and depending on like what sets you up for success. Like I feel like success is really like comes up and builds blocks for you. Where did you go to high school? Like what programs did they have? Did they have AP? Did they have harder classes? What was the curriculum like? How are they setting you up for success? Like that will build the foundation of which you go to college. And I guess I was talking to you previously, but when I was researching for my, like, I'm working at a Hackworth Fellowship, and we're kind of talking about, like, land acknowledgement and Indigenous community. But a big article I found was that Native American students are disproportionately likely to just drop out of college. They won't make it through. One of it's big about community, not able to find community, feeling like they're isolated, they're the only one. Another is their academics didn't feel like it supported them coming to college, that things were 10 times harder, and they felt like they didn't have actually the foundational skills to make it through their college career. So they felt like they're always behind and trying to catch up. And if that's like their experience, like that's going to be a really strenuous, like, way of trying to integrate yourself even in the community that you're in, like academic community. So I'm, hearing a lot of the intricate parts of your experience, and I see that could be very difficult.
Yeah, I feel like you don't realize how alone you are, especially as a Native student, like coming from a community where you're so supported and a family that like is constantly supporting you, to being alone and figuring things out alone and struggling alone. And it's hard to not have a community with other students to kind of like uplift each other and to like know that like, we're all struggling, but we can all work through it together. And I felt like it was really hard for me personally just to have to kind of rely on myself. And I feel like it's also back home not really common to struggle or to show that you're struggling. And so I felt like that was a big like reason why, which also like just kind of prevented me from getting help. But yeah, I found it like fascinating, like what you were saying about the statistics and what you read about, because like it is common, like when you told me that it is common for a lot of students to drop out of college or just go for the first year and then come back home, go to community college close to home, just because they're close to their family. And I feel like that's a big reason a lot of people get homesick. And like even going to a school in the state, being 8 hours away, because Montana's such a big state, being 8 hours away from your family like was still hard for a lot of students. And when I was back home, a lot of older people were asking me like if I was going back to college, and I was like a little confused. I'm like, yeah, of course I'm going back to college. And I remember asking my mom's like, well, a lot of people don't go back after the first year. And I was like yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, given how much I struggled, like I wanted to give up multiple times. And I feel like it makes sense, especially not having a community and not having the resources, especially because I feel like Santa Clara has a lot of resources that maybe like other schools don't have, a lot of like support resources. So yeah,
being a private institution, I feel like there's a lot of extra resources actually you gain for being a part of that. But yeah, I'm kind of questioning for the fact that, what do you think it was a lot of cultural elements that like made people not want to come back to college, I guess, too? Maybe not just for the fact that it was like a difficult academic struggle, but also for the fact like there's a really big culture element with like, I feel like Native communities, like family, like being constantly surrounded by family, like constantly having, your uncles, your grandmother, your literally your like huge family, like being around them constantly is like kind of a big portion of like difficulty finding yourself outside of that and being independent from that, because that's like all like what's kind of raised and kind of integrated into your values as community. But I don't want to speak for you, but I'm just curious if that is kind of another reason.
Yeah, I feel like most of the time the number one reason people would say is they were homesick. They went back home because they were homesick, because most of them finished their education, which shows that like they want to be in an academic institution, but it's back home. Like they do it at a community college that's close to home. And like definitely like makes sense that we have our academic struggles, especially like when we're coming from the high school I came from and didn't have the resources and just like didn't know how to really study or to really like prepare for big tests and like even understand the material. But I also feel like homesick and not being with family and community was such a big role. Like most people, their best friends are their cousins, and when you go to college, your cousins, like they're not the same age as you, like sometimes they are, but you go to different colleges and it's just like you don't have constant family around you. And I was talking to my grandma a little bit ago, and she was telling me she was sent to a boarding school, but it was like not as like intense as like the abusive ones, but she was sent to a Mormon school in Utah. And she said she really struggled being away from home because all they know is like when a dog has puppies and all the puppies are just laying right next to each other, they're all like in a little bundle. Like my grandma's like, that's how she grew up. Like you don't know anything else but your constant family. Like we're just always by each other. And like it was so hard for her to be away from home because she didn't have anyone to constantly be by. She had a foster family that she stayed with, and it was a Mormon school that her mom sent her to.
Oh, interesting. I'm really curious. I'm going to shift a little bit of directions, but how your identity or how you perceived your identity changed coming to, Santa Clara. I guess like we're talking about how like it was really hard to be a part of your, like be far from your family and kind of associate your identity outside of being part of your family. And so how did that change your perception of yourself as going to Santa Clara?
Yeah, I feel like I didn't realize how important my identity was until I left my community, because I feel like everyone is Native. That's just what you're around. You're used to seeing your cousin when you go hang out. You're used to seeing your auntie, your uncle. Someone is at the grocery store. It's just such a small town community, and then everyone is just lives in the community. And so I feel like when I came here, it was such a first off shock for people to meet someone who was Native American, but to also be half Mexican. I wasn't raised by my dad who was Mexican. I was raised with my mom, and my mom remarried to my stepdad who's Native American as well. So I was raised in a Native household. And so I didn't really know any of my like Mexican culture, any of really my Mexican roots. And so I took Spanish in high school, and then when I came like to SCU, there was such a big Latina community, and I felt like it felt nice to be a part of a community again. Even though it wasn't a Native community, I felt welcome, and I felt comfortable to be around people who were like me. And some of them weren't full Latino, but they welcomed me into their club, and I felt like it felt nice to have a community. And I was just trying to look for a community, like a Native community, that we could also hold a space for other students like me.
I love that you're able to find community outside and then kind of be able to see another part of your identity that's part of yourself and explore that through that community as well. I think that's very empowering and also reflective on being able to see your identities and understand both of them and their impact on you and yourself. But just kind of steer out and conclude with the podcast. Something I really want to briefly talk about is just why you think it's important to have Indigenous voices and being part of the present narrative today, and what do you think the university could necessarily also help with maybe, and things that you would like to see change in?
Yeah, I definitely think there has been things done on campus, but I think there can be many things that can still be done. Like, first of all, I feel like there's not a lot of students at Santa Clara, Native students at Santa Clara, and I feel like the number one reason is financials, and I feel like the school should offer more financial support for students to come to Santa Clara, especially students of the Ohlone and Muwekma tribes, their ancestors being in this space that this institution was built on. But I feel like this should be a scholarship that will allow students to come to the institution. I feel like there's such a small amount of Native students that come to college, and we can change that. Institutions can change that by supporting students to come to college. Financials is such a big burden for many people, but I don't think it should be a burden for Native American students when a lot of them are put onto reservations. A lot of them live on reservations where the school systems there aren't even sustainable to get them into college, to help them even be prepared for college. And I feel like the school can provide more financial funding, definitely, for students. And then I also think, like, representation on campus. Like, personally, I think the school should offer classes on Native American studies, like a Native American studies class. I feel like that would be a great class in the curriculum, like, as a requirement for all students to take. Like, if you're going to be at a university that's built on Indigenous people's land, you should have a class that at least recognizes or that can give you a deeper understanding of Native American people and their communities. And, like, I think that would be a great idea for the institution to offer. A lot of, like, schools in Montana have those as required courses you have to take, and I feel like California should also have that, especially Santa Clara. And I feel like there should be more, like, maybe, I guess this could be something Nat could do, is just, like, having more events and, like, being able to bring more recognition in the student area for students to kind of be more aware and to realize, hey, your classmates are Native American, you go to school with other students. And just to, like, pause, I'm losing my thought.
I do agree. Like, I think those are some good ideas. And financial support, like what I was mentioning before, like about the articles, like a lot of them also had the barrier of financial, like to be able to get out of their maybe reservation or the place that they were living at to be able to, like, move to further get higher education. So if it would be possible, like, to support those students financially as much as we can. I know there's tons of budget cuts, and there's been a lot of, like, I feel like the first thing that kind of usually an institution does cut is representation ones, and that actually brings a lot of conversation that needs to be done as well. But yeah, I want to, wrap this up and kind of, thank you for coming on to The Word on the Street, sharing your experience. I think it's so easy for people to look at the Native American community as, like, moments and relics of the past, but they are very real and very present amongst our community members, just not even, like, just on our campus, but outside our community. I think people need to recognize that Native Americans are very presently living, Indigenous people are presently living and existing, and that we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to reverse the erasure that's already been happening to this community. I also really want to recognize that all Native experiences are completely different, and, I'm so glad you're able to share your portion of your experience, and it probably is different amongst a lot of other Native Americans, and not to use this one opportunity to just be, voice, but also just keep it in perspective as we continue and talk about these issues forward. But yeah, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes, very excited. But yeah, this will conclude our podcast. Share love, y'all. See you on the next episode.